You spent your whole life thinking of this shoe as the ugliest, most uncool thing a human being could put on their feet. The orthopedic sandal, the nurse shoe, the one your dad wore with socks in the garden. For decades, it had nicknames that were basically insults. The pensioner's slipper, the eco clog, the health shoe you'd be embarrassed to be seen in. That exact shoe is now worth around 8 billion euros. To put that in perspective, that's nearly double the value of Hugo Boss. It's the same league as Puma. A single pair of the fancy ones can cost close to 1,000 euros. And the man who now controls this 200-year-old German sandal maker is one of the two richest human beings on the entire planet. So, how does an ugly orthopedic sandal go from your grandmother's closet to the peak of high fashion? And who actually got rich when it did? Because the answer to that second question is where this story turns dark. The people who made this shoe famous in the first place are the exact people who just got shoved out. And by the end of this video, you'll see the quiet strategy behind it, the same playbook being run on brands you love right now. But to understand the ending, we have to go back to the very beginning. And the beginning is a problem with your feet. Before the year 1900, shoes were basically instruments of torture. A flat wooden board for a sole, some hard leather wrapped around it, done. They looked miserable, and they were miserable. Then a German shoemaker named Conrad Birkenstock inherited his father's business and had one genuinely revolutionary idea. What if, instead of forcing the foot onto a flat plank, the shoe gave the foot its own bed? A sole that curved and molded to match the actual anatomy of a human foot. He called it the footbed. And that's not a marketing word, it's the entire reason this company still exists. Birkenstocks are, to this day, almost unreasonably comfortable. And that comfort is the bedrock everything else gets built on. Remember that, because 100 years from now in this story, comfort is the thing that gets left behind. For a long time, though, comfort was all it had. It took nearly a century, until the 1960s, for the family to launch an actual sandal, a model called the Madrid that you can still buy today, 60 years later. And one of its very first customers is the person who accidentally builds the company's future. An American woman named Margot Fraser discovers the sandal on a trip to Germany, becomes obsessed with the footbed, and gets the license to sell it back home in California. That's the second turning point, and it's a big one, because the United States is today the single most important market this company has. Margot Fraser planted that seed. But here's the catch: the Americans reached the exact same verdict the Germans did. Comfortable, and deeply, deeply uncool. So uncool, in fact, that wearing them became a statement. If you wore this sandal in the 1970s, you were announcing that you did not care about fashion at all, which is precisely why one particular group adopted them as a badge of honor: the hippies. Anti-fashion was the point, and one of those early adopters is a name you did not expect in a story about sandals: Steve Jobs. Yes, the man who invented the iPhone was a devoted Birkenstock wearer, and he wore one specific pair so hard, so thoroughly into the ground, that they became molded to the shape of his own feet. Now guess what that beat-up, falling-apart pair of sandals sold for at auction? Here's a hint. For that money, you could have bought a Ferrari instead. The final price was around 220,000 euros for used sandals. But even a celebrity like that couldn't fix the image. For decades, the brand and the world of luxury fashion had about as much in common as the Paris runways and your local gardening club. Even when supermodels wore them in the early 2000s, nothing changed. The shoe stayed a punchline. Until one ordinary October day in Paris in 2013, when everything flipped overnight. At the fashion show for the luxury label Celine, everything looks normal. Expensive outfits, important people, the usual glamour, except for one detail that made the entire fashion world stop. No high heels, no pumps, no stilettos. The models came down the runway in flat, comfortable footbed sandals. That was the third turning point, the moment comfortable shoes became officially chic. Suddenly, fashion magazines were devoting glossy photo spreads to the sandal they'd mocked for 50 years. It became a kind of uniform for celebrities getting perfectly photographed by paparazzi on their days off. The demand got so insane that when the shoes sold out in the US, the singer Beyoncé reportedly called the company's German headquarters personally to get her hands on more. And here's the almost unbelievable part. The company was completely unprepared for its own success. At the peak of this explosion, Birkenstock reportedly didn't even have a proper marketing department. A 200-year-old family business was suddenly a global sensation and had no idea how to handle it. Which opens the door for the fourth turning point. The professionals arrive. In 2013, for the first time in the company's entire history, outside managers are brought in to run it instead of the family. And it works. They transform the sleepy family workshop into a global corporation, streamline it, nearly double the staff in 3 years, and start doing collaborations with big-name designers. The result? Between 2014 and 2020, they roughly tripled their revenue. In 6 years, a dusty eco-shoemaker became a genuine world brand. And when you become a world brand, the biggest predators in the world start circling. Or in this case, the single biggest. His name is Bernard Arnault. He's the French billionaire behind the luxury empire LVMH. He's worth well over 200 billion euros. And for years, he's been trading the title of richest person on earth back and forth with Elon Musk. His empire is a staggering web of luxury brands. Louis Vuitton, Dior, Fendi, Bulgari, Dom Perignon. The list goes on almost absurdly long. If it's expensive and iconic, there's a good chance he owns a piece of it. In 2021, Arnault moves in on Birkenstock. Through his investment firm, he buys a controlling stake, and he believes in it so strongly that he reaches into his own pocket for even more. In simple terms, the man who owns Louis Vuitton now calls the shots at the humble German sandal company. That is the fifth and by far the most dramatic turning point. The small, cozy family business that Conrad Birkenstock started is now in the hands of a globally connected billionaire capitalist. And he does not waste time. That same year, for the first time in its 250-year history, Birkenstock crosses 1 billion euros in sales. The next year, 1.2 billion. So how did he actually do it? To understand, you need to understand the machine that was just installed under the hood. And it's the same machine running quietly beneath a lot of brands you buy. When a company wants to grow, growth costs money. New factories, more workers. That money can come from the company's own pocket, which is slow and steady. Or the owners can sell off pieces of the company to investors in exchange for a chunk of the profits. And there are two flavors of that. One is venture capital, risky bets on young, unproven startups that might become the next big thing or might collapse entirely. The other is private equity, and that's what happened here. Private equity investors don't gamble on the unproven. They buy an already successful, already working company, and their entire mission is to squeeze more profit out of it, to make the money machine run harder. So what's the very first thing the billionaires' people do? They raise the prices. And not gently. Back in 2020, the classic Arizona model cost about 65 euros. After the takeover, that same sandal jumps nearly 40% to around 90 euros. The official reason given is rising production costs, but here's the number that quietly demolishes that explanation. Last year, the company reportedly made close to 400 million euros in profit, and its profit margin, the share of every sale that turns into pure profit, was around 35%. To see how wild that is, compare it to Adidas, whose margin was just under 3%. Read that again. Relative to sales, Birkenstock was roughly 10 times more profitable than Adidas. These are not the numbers of a company barely covering rising costs. But the price hikes aren't even the ruthless part. The ruthless part is who got left behind. Meet a shoe seller named Hartmut Kempmann, who runs 2 shoe shops in Western Germany. He sold Birkenstocks for 47 years, almost half a century. And then, out of a clear blue sky, he got a letter. As of this November, the partnership is over. After nearly 50 years, the letter didn't even address him by name. It opened with, "Dear business partner," and informed him that, for strategic reasons, the relationship was ending. He wasn't alone. More than 2,000 retail partners reportedly got that same cold goodbye. Decades-long relationships terminated because, in the company's view, these humble shops no longer fit the image the brand wanted to project. For a seller like Kempmann, this is a catastrophe. He told us Birkenstock made up 40% of his revenue. And for fans who don't live in trendy big cities, it means the shoes are simply vanishing from the stores near them. Because the strategy behind it is cold and brilliant. In the future, Birkenstock wants to sell directly to you, through its own website and its own sleek boutiques opening around the world. When there's no middleman shop taking a cut, the profit margin gets even fatter, and the brand gets to control exactly how premium it looks. The company even now employs its own private detectives around the world, hunting down counterfeit sandals. Years ago, it flat out cut ties with Amazon rather than share a marketplace with cheap lookalikes. And this is the heart of it, the quiet strategy the whole video has been building toward. The very people who made this shoe famous were the ordinary ones. The nurses, the kindergarten teachers, the hospital staff who stood on their feet all day and needed that footbed. They built this brand from the ground up. And they are precisely the customers now being priced out and quietly shown the door. As one business analysis put it, maybe that's the entire point. Maybe it's now intentional that not just anyone gets to wear Birkenstocks. The comfort shoe for working people is being deliberately turned into a luxury object for people who can drop nearly €1,000 on a sandal, a price that appeared once it partnered with the billionaire's own luxury label, Dior. Which brings us to the final move, and the biggest gamble of all, because there's one way to squeeze even more money out of a hype this enormous: take the company public, sell shares on the stock market to the entire world. And Birkenstock did exactly that, chasing that €8 billion valuation, going public in New York, not Germany, because America is where the real market is. But here's why that's genuinely dangerous, and why this story doesn't have a guaranteed happy ending. Fashion is built on trends, and trends are brutal. Loved today, dead tomorrow. There's a cautionary tale that haunts this exact playbook. The boot brand Dr. Martens. Same story. Bought by a private equity investor, taken public at the absolute peak of its hype. And then it crashed. Hard. Investors are every bit as merciless as the fashion world itself. Today's must-have is next year's embarrassment. So step back and look at what actually happened here. Someone took the single most uncool shoe in the world and, through comfort, luck, one Paris runway, and a billionaire's cold precision, turned it into a fashion trophy. From a business standpoint, it's a genuinely stunning achievement. But it came with a trade. To become a luxury icon, the brand is willing to burn the loyalty of the exact people who carried it for 50 years. The eco crowd, the nurses, the ordinary feet that needed it most. The bet is that the world will keep paying luxury prices for what used to be a working person's sandal. And if that bet is right, the billionaire wins enormously. But if the hype fades the way hype always eventually fades, the comfort shoe won't go back to being a comfort shoe. It'll just be remembered as the thing that sold out. And by then, the people who might have stayed loyal will already be long gone.